Warning: this episode contains graphic depictions of violence, including the kidnapping, torture, and ritualistic sacrifice of a child. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
Dark world of ritualistic child abuse.
Witchcraft.
They would sacrifice animals.
Does it make you want to hate murder, or does it make you want to do murder?
Let's explore the darkness of mankind, one crime at a time. Welcome back to Rogue Darkness, the podcast that uncovers how the misinterpretations and misinformation surrounding witchcraft, the occult, and other beliefs have led many to do unthinkable crimes. From ritualistic killings and the demons that live in all of us, to exploration of the macabre and delving deep into the unknown. Let's explore the darkness of mankind, one crime at a time. I'm your host of the Grim and Gruesome, Raven. Let's go rogue and get right into today's chilling crime. The gruesome case of the crime of Gador, where a young boy was brutally slain in a ritualistic sacrifice in an attempt to cure a wealthy man's tuberculosis. But first, let's start off from the very beginning. It all began in the year of 1910 in Gador, a municipality of the city of Almeria in Spain, when a man by the name of Francisco Ortega was unfortunately diagnosed with tuberculosis. Being a time frame that lacked advanced medical care and advice, Ortega desperately sought a cure as his discomfort continued to worsen. Without many other options he could easily resort to, Ortega decided to ask a local healer, or witch doctor, referred to as a curandera in Spanish, named Agustina Rodriguez, for guidance. Based on his situation, Rodriguez ended up referring Ortega to another healer named Francisco Leona, who was also reportedly the town's barber. Leona was not very well liked, it seems, as he was known to be shady and even had a criminal record under his belt. Leona agreed to help heal Ortega if he paid him a hefty 3,000 reales, which in today's day and age would still be a large sum of money, so we can definitely see how desperate Ortega was and how eagerly he wanted a cure. Being a wealthy farmer and able to afford the proposed service, lacking any other known options at the time, Ortega agreed to the deal and paid Leona the money. Francisco Leona set out with Julio Hernandez, who was actually the son of Agustina Rodriguez, the initial healer Ortega consulted to help him get rid of his illness. Believing that a sacrifice of a young child would be most powerful and ultimately most effective, the duo then went on the hunt for their victim. On June 28, 1910, they came across a young boy, 7-year-old Bernardo Gonzalez Parra, who was from another town over from Gador, Rioja. They quickly kidnapped the boy before anyone noticed he was gone, snuffing out any chance of a scream by covering his face with a chloroform-soaked cloth, rendering him immobile. With young Bernardo incapacitated, they then shoved his body into a sack and took him to an abandoned barn where they would then begin their horrific ritual. Taking Bernardo out of the sack, Leona reportedly laid him down on a table that was set up there as an altar, and while Bernardo was being held down by the others that were there, Leona then stabbed him in the armpit. Agustina Rodriguez then took a cooking pot they had brought with them, and she began collecting the blood that was now pouring out of the wound. They then mixed the blood with sugar and gave it to Ortega to drink. Unfortunately for young Bernardo, who must have been so frightened during the horrific ordeal, unable to escape due to the paralysis induced from the chloroform, the group had yet to complete their sacrifice. They took him to a place which is known as Las Posicas, where Leona then proceeded to kill him, reportedly crushing his skull with a rock. Once Bernardo had passed, Leona then cut open his little body and began extracting some of the fat and mesentery from his body to make a compress to apply to Ortega's chest, another presumed cure for the tuberculosis. To close out the ritual and finalize their sacrifice, the group concealed Bernardo's body within a crevice located in Las Posicas, leaving his body unburied, but covered with herbs and stones. Since the ritualistic murder had been carried out by a group of people, and not just Leona himself, the other individuals involved wanted a cut of the pay for their participation. Leona reportedly didn't divide the 3,000 out equally, though, so in retaliation, Julio Hernandez went to the authorities and told them about the crime. yet claiming he had seen a body of a young boy while he was out bird hunting, neglecting to tell them of his own involvement in the murder. When authorities arrived at the scene where Hernandez told them the body was, the townspeople of Gador didn't even hesitate to turn Leona over to the cops. As mentioned previously, he was well known for his criminal, seedy, and negative use of occult practices. During the court proceedings, Leona accused Julio Hernandez of involvement in the crime when he gave his testimony, while Julio, in turn, did the same to Leona. After a merry-go-round of blaming and accusations being thrown about, both men ultimately ended up confessing to their involvement in the crime. With all of the individuals involved coming forth, the authorities were able to sentence them accordingly. Francisco Leona was sentenced to death by garrote, which I didn't know what this was, so I had to look into it. And according to wikipedia.org, a garrote is a weapon, usually a handheld ligature of chain, rope, scarf, wire, or fishing line that is used to strangle a person to death. And although this form of execution was what he had been sentenced with, Ortega ultimately ended up dying in prison before his execution date. Francisco Ortega and Agustina Rodriguez were both sentenced to death by hanging for their involvement in Bernardo's murder. Jose Hernandez was sentenced to 17 years in prison for participating in the preparation of the murder, but since he was not directly involved in the murder itself, he was spared the death sentence. His brother, Julio, was ultimately given a sentence of death. However, he ultimately ended up receiving a pardon from the crime on grounds of insanity, reportedly after a psychiatric evaluation had been done on him. After word of the brutal torture and ritualistic sacrifice of Bernardo Gonzalez Parra got out to the locals, the crime gave rise to some eerie folktales, specifically focusing on the notion of a local boogeyman who would take children who misbehaved and put them in a sack and take them off to never be seen again. A tale of caution to children to potentially steer them away from conversing with strangers, as anyone, anywhere, could potentially be the Spanish boogeyman. This horrific sacrificial crime was ultimately defined as a medical crime that was unfortunately instigated by the beliefs surrounding the medicinal and healing properties of human blood and the use of children's fat to bring healing. The unfortunate loss of life due to the misunderstandings of occultism and misusing its knowledge to cause harm to others is something that should never happen. Rest in peace, Bernardo. Your name will never be forgotten. So that was the horrific case of the crime of Gador, and how the misunderstandings and misuse of occultism and ritualistic magic led to the brutal death of an innocent child, all because of the people's misconceptions of its potential healing components. Let me know your thoughts on this case. Feel free to contact me at roguedarknesspod@gmail.com. You can also reach me directly on Instagram or Twitter at rogue_darkness. I'm always interested in hearing your thoughts on cases I've covered, as well as hear any suggestions you may have for future ones. All the links to the articles referenced in this episode, along with links to my socials and contact information, are all down below for your reference. As always, if you like what you hear on Rogue Darkness, be sure to spread the word by sharing it with your family and friends, or with anyone who you think might enjoy it. And also be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple iTunes, or wherever else you can leave a review to let other listeners know you enjoy the pod. By rating, reviewing, subscribing, and sharing, you are directly helping the show out, and it's always greatly appreciated. And if you're looking for more ways to support the show, I do have a Ko-fi page set up for donations, and any support on there is always greatly appreciated. Also be sure to follow me on my socials, Instagram and Twitter, as well as my YouTube if you want to see the episodes in video format. And you can also go one step further to show your love for the show and get yourself some Rogue Darkness merch through my Bonfire merch store. There's a lot of awesome designs in the shop, so definitely give them a look. And also, with Valentine's Day soon approaching, we do have a special logo that I launched just for Valentine's Day, but I'll likely keep it for even longer, called the Love is Deadly logo. Definitely check it out. It's a beautiful logo, and I'm sure you guys will love it. And with that said, that concludes this week's episode of Rogue Darkness. The darkness is all around us, and I can confidently say that reality truly is more terrifying than fiction. Until next time.